If you think of the coronavirus pandemic as a marathon race, how far has Australia run? Halfway? Could the finish line be in sight? Well, actually, we haven't even started to raise a sweat. Epidemiologists tell us we're barely a kilometre into this 42k test of endurance. And that means any talk of easing lockdown restrictions, no matter how bullish the Prime Minister is, must be considered very carefully. For all our good work so far, complacency now could kill. And a second wave of COVID-19 in Australia, especially heading into winter, might be a wipeout.
Can you feel it? Now it's coming back.
It's a warm Friday afternoon and everywhere you look, people are out soaking up the late autumn sun.
So say Geronimo, say Geronimo.
Australia acted fast and early on coronavirus, and we've now earned the right to relax restrictions.
There will be risks, there will be challenges, there will be outbreaks, there will be more cases, there will be setbacks. But we cannot allow our fear of going backwards from stopping us from going forwards.
For these beachgoers, too many waves are never enough, but any more waves of coronavirus in Australia could spell disaster. So what is the safest approach for the next few months? Well, the problem is that no one really seems to know. The Prime Minister is at odds with the Premiers. Medical experts have differing opinions as well. And so in the end, that just leaves the public feeling confused.
Now is really not the time for Australia to let its foot off the brake. This virus is very, very contagious. I think you're going to see new cases really soar.
If you had your time again there, you'd definitely be doing things differently, I'd imagine.
Yes, I think we do, because the second wave is much bigger than the first wave.
A lot of people still take it for granted. They think it's just the flu. You're just going to be in bed and you'll ride it out after 2 weeks and you'll be fine. But I'm not. It's 5 weeks down the track and I still don't feel right.
And if a fit young bloke like you gets hit this hard, look out everyone.
Exactly. Exactly right.
When you think of the kind of people to be decimated by coronavirus, 29-year-old builder Adrian Ottaviano is a long way from the stereotype. Water skiing, hitting the slopes, bike riding, he was always a picture of fitness.
I was pretty active. I do a bit of motorbike riding. I'd cycle a couple of days a week with a few friends. I'm pretty active at work. Could never sit still, could never sit in front of a TV more than an hour, and would always hate being at home.
Did you think you'd ever catch coronavirus?
No, never.
But 5 weeks ago, Adrian did catch it. He still doesn't know where or how. And quickly, this small room became his prison. This young man is a reminder that the virus hits hard and is not to be underestimated. At its worst, what was it like?
Terrible. Wouldn't wish it upon my worst enemy. It was one of the worst experiences I've ever been through. There were days where I couldn't even move out of bed. I'd have to force myself to go to the bathroom. Just the body was in pain and agony.
Your worry was that if you got so sick that you needed to call an ambulance, you didn't have the energy to actually dial 000.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. I couldn't pick up the phone, let alone yell out to my wife who was 2 doors down. I couldn't physically do any of that.
Was there a point where you thought, this could kill me?
I woke up one morning and I couldn't move and I was breathing really heavy and I thought, maybe this is it. Maybe my number's up.
Australia has had a haunting feel to it over the last couple of months. Cities empty as people obey strict lockdown orders.
So far away from me.
But a dramatic fall in coronavirus infections across the country in the last few weeks now has many feeling like we might just be winning the war.
You're so far.
But plenty of experts aren't so sure. Do you think that Australia is every chance now of just undoing all its good work?
I think that's exactly right, Tom, and that's what I really don't want to see. So, if now you reopen and you see the cases come back, then you're going to have to lock down much more broadly and for longer.
Dr. Dina Grayson is an infectious disease specialist based in Florida. Thousands of people are still dying every single day in the US. Yet she is watching her country open back up for business before those numbers even come down. And Dr. Grayson has grave concerns about Australia's moves to reopen as well, particularly because we are heading into winter.
I mean, you unfortunately are in the midst of what I call wildfire season. And I mean, I use that analogy for a reason because, of course, Australia just suffered the devastating wildfires, not so long ago, a few months ago. And so you have to think about flu season as wildfire season. So you have a little brush fire, it's going to spread like going through dry grass.
Some people might watch this and say, she's in America. What would she know? She's scaremongering.
Well, that's not what I'm trying to do here. Your country's done a fabulous job of getting your hands around this virus. And just as you're really, kind of entering flu season and you're not having a lot of new cases, my worry is you let your foot off the brake and so many people will die. So you're left with these terrible choices. Do you stay locked down with economic disaster, or do you try to open up too early? People aren't going to want to leave their houses, and then you end up with lots and lots of people dead.
Dr. Grayson points to the Spanish flu of 1918 as the greatest proof of how dangerous it can be to underestimate the potency of a second wave.
Well, here in the United States, 80% of the people who died during the 1918 pandemic died in that second wave. We lost more American lives, 675,000 American lives, in the course of about 18 months than died in all of World War I. And this virus is behaving the exact same way. And I knew back in December this represented a pandemic threat. And I started telling people in late January and February, look, this is going to come in waves.
How relevant do you think the term second wave is to Australia at the moment?
Look, I think it's worse than nonsense. It's dangerous.
It's rare you'll hear an epidemiologist play down the idea of a second wave of coronavirus. But Dr. Kamalini Lukuge feels like it's time to break ranks. The Associate Professor at Australian National University is an expert in public health responses to humanitarian crises and thinks the Spanish flu is largely irrelevant to what we're experiencing today. You think comparing what happened with the Spanish flu back in the 1900s to now, it's like oranges and apples.
Exactly. I think if we think back to then, it was the perfect storm. People were living in much more crowded conditions. We had the end of a terrible world war. We had soldiers coming back from the front line who'd been living in horrendous conditions, who spread the infection throughout Europe. All of those factors contributed to a pandemic that was very difficult to control. But we look today now where we are with this COVID pandemic, and we're in a very different position, particularly in Australia.
So far away from me.
Dr. Lukuge believes Australia is in a strong position to now get through this pandemic with minimal damage, and says the key from here is testing. Anyone with even the slightest symptom must get swabbed immediately.
To get out of this is having everybody who needs to be tested and tested early. And the way we make that happen is that everybody who has early symptoms, a mild cough, sore throat, fever, they need to be able to know that they have to get tested, and they need to be able to go somewhere and get tested as soon as possible. If we have that in place, we know everyone in our community has access to that, then we have our ticket out of this.
I get the sense you look at the way that some other Western countries have approached this and think, thank God we live in Australia and we're doing it the way we are doing it.
I do. I think we are a lucky country. But on the other hand, I think it's not luck, right? If we know that everyone has access to healthcare, that everyone, if they have to stop working because they're sick, can continue to feed themselves and their families, have a decent income for living, then we know that we can do the things we need to do to control this disease. That's why we're the lucky country. It's not luck.
coming up, learning from the mistakes of other countries.
Lifting the state of emergency gave a wrong message.
Dire warnings.
The second wave is bigger than the first wave.
The worst is yet to come.
We are at the start of the marathon.
That's next on 60 Minutes. Hokkaido is the second largest island in Japan. A picturesque region in the north that for now is eerily quiet. They're in lockdown here for a second time during this pandemic. A state of emergency declared again after they tried to return to normal too fast. Did they get it wrong?
I think that was a wrong decision, yes.
Professor Kazuto Suzuki is from Hokkaido University. After an early outbreak in this region, they quickly got on top of case numbers, limiting new infections to 1 or 2 a day, just like states in Australia. He believes when people there saw the decrease, they became complacent, wanting to get back to work and breathe life again into the local economy. Then, in 1 week, infections jumped nearly 1,000%. The decision, was it forced because people were just getting too impatient? They wanted their freedom back.
Yeah, they wanted to have a freedom back. There was a huge pressure on the society, economy, and industry. So we couldn't be able to continue the state of emergency much longer.
Your second wave is now worse than your first wave.
The second wave is bigger than the first wave, yes. So this has been a serious problem, and the second wave is definitely bigger than the first.
If you had your time again there, you'd definitely be doing things differently, I'd imagine.
Yes, I think we do. I think the most important thing is that we shall send the different message. The message of lifting the state of emergency was a wrong message because it gives a sort of sense of feeling that the threat is gone and everything is back in normal.
It's the same balancing act that our leaders need to manage as well. Australia's economy is being crippled, so there really is an urgency when it comes to easing off some of the restrictions. But get it wrong, and the fear is that we too could be savaged by a second wave of infections. Professor, are we through the worst of it?
No, I don't think we are.
Professor James McCaw is an epidemiologist at Melbourne University and warns we need to accept this is going to be a very slow burn.
To me, this is a little bit like a marathon. It feels like we're way into it, but we're only a kilometre in. So that first kilometre is hard. I hope the next 41 aren't so difficult, but they're still there's a lot of kilometres to go.
I think most Australians would feel like we've passed the halfway mark.
Yeah, look, and psychologically, that's a natural thing. I feel like that as well. But I also know from my profession and my experience studying how diseases spread and knowing enough about this virus, that we are at the start of that marathon.
One of Australia's biggest challenges in the coming months is actually the fact we've been so successful in limiting the spread of coronavirus. It means we have very little resistance to the disease in our population, which will significantly slow down how quickly we can reopen society. Can you give us a sense of the level of immunity you would need within the community for everyone to be safe to go out and resume life as normal, as opposed to the level of immunity we actually have now?
We're probably at somewhere around 1% immunity at the moment. To be able to prevent the disease from spreading or have it spread in a very slow and sporadic way, you're going to need upwards well over 50% of the population, possibly up to 70 or 80% of the population having immunity.
Impatience and complacency are two of the biggest dangers for Australia going forward, just like what happened in Japan. What's your message to Australians?
Don't take the lockdown for granted, and this is a very dangerous virus. You cannot relax. It is extremely dangerous because one day this asymptomatic person will infect others. And the power of transmission of this virus is extremely powerful.
How much exercise does it take for you to be out of breath these days?
Not much, a short walk and pretty much out of breath.
Adrian Ottaviano certainly knows how powerful it is after contracting coronavirus back in March. He endured weeks of agony before finally, a fortnight ago, testing negative. But the 29-year-old builder still isn't strong enough to return to work and now fears he may have permanent breathing issues because of the virus.
My lungs copped a beating. They were really, really sore.
Do you feel normal now?
No, I still feel a bit weird, still feel a bit edgy, get very short out of breath. You know, talking to you now, I still feel a little bit out of breath.
So just having a chat,
Yeah,
let alone going back to work.
Yeah, exactly. So even just taking a short stroll in the street, you know, I get out of breath.
Yeah.
Adrian is going at a slow pace now because of coronavirus and believes other Australians should think about doing the same.
How can I protect you in this crazy world?
What do you think about people who are keen to just get Australia back to normal? Okay, we're through the worst of the lockdown. Let's business as usual now, please.
Look, I suppose each to their own, but if you want to run the risk, but I'm not. I'm over it. I wouldn't go through this again. Definitely take things very differently now.
Do you think there are still people out there that are a bit complacent about this virus?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. People running back to the beach or just taking it for granted or don't know anybody that's got it or think it's only old, elderly people that it affects the most. It's not.
You're proof.
Yeah, I'm proof, exactly.
Hello, I'm Tara Brown. Thanks for watching. To keep up with the latest from 60 Minutes Australia, make sure you subscribe to our channel. You can also download the 9Now app for full episodes and other exclusive 60 Minutes content.